Travel Through Grief. Welcome to Travel Through Grief. I'm your host, Ellen Beckemeyer. I'm a Martha Beck Wayfinder life coach, and I want to talk to you about grief through the lens of the Twilight Zone. This is going to be a fun episode. Not because grief is science fiction, but because grief can make reality feel emotionally unfamiliar, like you have stepped into another dimension, while everyone else keeps living inside the old one. I have always loved episodes from the Twilight Zone like Time Enough, At Last, The Obsolete Man, and Where Is Everybody? Because beneath the suspense, they were never really about monsters. They were about humanity, fear, isolation, identity, loneliness, meaning, memory, connection, psychological depth. Human beings trying to make sense of reality when something no longer feels stable. That is why the Twilight Zone still feels timeless. The stories may have strange twists or surreal settings, but emotionally they are deeply recognizable. The fear was rarely about creatures or aliens. The fear was psychological. It was about realizing the world no longer feels emotionally dependable. It was about being the only person in the room who sensed something had changed. It was about questioning your own perception while everybody else continued acting normal. Grief does that too. You wake up one morning and the world keeps functioning exactly as it did before. The grocery store opens, traffic moves, people laugh at restaurants, families post vacation pictures, coworkers debate lunch plans, television shows continue airing, holidays still arrive, just like Mother's Day yesterday. Everything appears operational. But emotionally, reality has shifted so dramatically that you feel like you are standing slightly outside of your life. You're standing outside of an ordinary life, looking in through invisible glass. Honestly, some days grief feels like a healing journey, less like it, and more like Rod Serling standing in the corner narrating your nervous breakdown. Submitted for your approval, one emotionally exhausted woman standing in the cereal aisle trying not to cry because a song from 1987 started playing unexpectedly. And the strange thing is, grief makes ordinary situations feel psychologically loaded. You walk into a restaurant and suddenly the lighting feels too dim. The music feels too loud. Everybody at the next table seems suspiciously cheerful. You start looking around like maybe you accidentally wandered into the Stepford Wives. Everyone is smiling, laughing, ordering appetizers, discussing patio furniture. Meanwhile, you are over there having a complete existential crisis because the waitress asked if you wanted soup or salad. And honestly, both options suddenly feel emotionally overwhelming. That is the bridge. The bridge is emotional. The bridge is suspense. The bridge is confusion. The bridge is disorientation. The bridge is nostalgia, but not a clear story anymore. And grief has irony everywhere, which is why I actually think humor belongs in conversations about it. Not cruel humor, human humor. The kind that makes you laugh because otherwise you might lose your mind. Like, how can you completely hold it together during an important meeting but burst into tears because somebody used the wrong brand of mayonnaise? Or how grief brain turns you into the main character of your own Twilight Zone episode. You walk into a room and forget why you were there. I'm at that age. You open the refrigerator and somehow find the TV remote. You stand at Target staring at laundry detergent for 20 minutes, like you were solving ancient philosophy. Perhaps the true mystery was Tide Pods all along. That is grief too. Your nervous system becomes overstimulated and emotionally exhausted, and suddenly simple decisions feel absurdly difficult. And on the bridge, ordinary sensations become emotionally amplified. Silence feels heavier. Time feels distorted. A flickering light can make your nervous system jump. The wind becomes louder. The wind on the bridge scared me, not because it was symbolic, because it was loud, cold, and unpredictable. Sometimes it felt so strong, enough to knock me completely off balance. A couple weeks ago, I was at the gas station and it just kept flying my dress up like Marilyn Monroe. Other times, the exact same wind calmed me. Same wind, different experience. That is grief. One moment it overwhelms your nervous system so intensely you feel like you cannot function normally. The next moment, it softens just enough for you to breathe again. That unpredictability is part of what makes grief feel surreal. One day you can tell a story and laugh, even the same day. That exact same memory destroys you emotionally in the middle of Walgreens. No warning, no soundtrack. Just emotional whiplash in aisle 5. And while all of this is happening internally, everyone else seems to keep moving through life untouched. Not because they are shallow, not because they are bad people. They simply are not standing in the same emotional dimension you are standing in at that moment. That can create profound loneliness. You can sit in a crowded restaurant and feel completely alone. You can smile during conversations while internally feeling disconnected from the rhythm of ordinary life. You can hear people passionately debating vacation plans or fantasy football while your mind is wrestling with mortality, identity, memory, love, and meaning. That is why grief is not simply sadness. Grief is existential. It forces a deep dive into what it means to be human. And that is why the Twilight Zone connects so deeply to grief for me. Beneath the suspense and eerie atmosphere, the show was always exploring the human condition. It was philosophical, psychological, existential. Rod Serling used surreal scenarios to ask deeply human questions. What happens when isolation becomes unbearable? What happens when identity begins dissolving? What happens when reality no longer feels stable? What happens when society strips away individuality? What happens when memory, fear, loneliness, or conformity take over? Those are grief questions too. In the episode Where Is Everybody?, a man walks through a completely normal town where everything technically functions, but emotionally something is missing. The lights work, the diner exists, the streets are intact, yet the emotional emptiness creates psychological terror. That is grief. The world is still here, but someone important is missing from it. Everything continues operating while you internally keep searching for the missing presence. And honestly, after enough grief, you start relating to him a little too much. You walk into CVS at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday and think, where is everybody emotionally? People are physically present, but internally you feel like you are moving through another reality entirely. Then there is the episode Time Enough at Last with Burgess Meredith. Some of you may know him as Penguin from Batman, which may be one of the greatest ironic endings in television history, and honestly one of the funniest, emotionally devastating things I have ever seen. Because here is this man who just wants quiet. That is it. He wants people to stop interrupting him. He wants time to think. He definitely wants time to read. He was such a bookworm. He wants time to breathe. And honestly, as an adult woman who has experienced grief, responsibility, overwhelm, noise, stress, and constant emotional input from life, I relate to this man deeply. There have absolutely been moments in my life where I thought, you know what sounds incredible? Silence. No notifications, no expectations, no errands, no obligations. No one asking me, what is for dinner? Just me, a chair, a blanket, my books, my glasses, and uninterrupted peace. And grief can intensify that feeling because the nervous system becomes exhausted. Human interaction can feel overwhelming. Noise can feel overwhelming. Decision-making can feel overwhelming. Sometimes you genuinely want the world to quiet down for a while. Well, Henry Bemis got his wish and immediately discovered something very human. Be careful what you ask for emotionally, because sometimes what we think what we need is not actually what we need. Human beings are not built for complete isolation. We say we want everyone to leave us alone until everybody actually leaves us alone. Then suddenly we are talking to canned beans like they are co-workers. And Burgess Meredith plays that role so perfectly because he captures this nervous, vulnerable humanity underneath the irony. He is not some action hero. He is just a tired little man who wants to read his books in peace without society yelling at him every 5 minutes. Honestly, relatable content. And then comes the glasses scene. The absolute emotional betrayal of that moment. This man finally gets, spoiler alert, uninterrupted reading time for the first time in his life. No boss, no interruption, no pressure. Just books and silence. He was so giddy. And here is another spoiler. And then his glasses break. I wear glasses. This episode traumatized me. To this day, every time I clean my lenses, I think, handle carefully, Ellen. Civilization is one accident away. Because if you wear glasses, you understand the panic immediately. Those glasses were not accessories. Those glasses were survival equipment. That scene is so powerful because it captures something true about life and grief at the same time. The irony of finally reaching the thing you thought would bring peace, only to discover life is still fragile. And what makes that episode land even harder is that in a strange way, many of us lived through a version of time enough at last during the pandemic. Before the world shut down, so many people were exhausted. They were overscheduled, overstimulated, constantly rushing, always somewhere, always answering something, always dealing with that noise, traffic, obligations, notifications, errands, schedules, expectations. People kept saying, I just want a break. I just want some peace and quiet. I just want time at home. I wish the world would slow down. Well, then it did. And for many people, especially people considered non-essential during that time, life suddenly became eerily quiet. The roads emptied, restaurants closed, stories felt surreal. Entire cities became emotionally unfamiliar. And at first, some of us almost experienced relief. No rushing, no pressure to constantly perform socially, no packed schedules. Suddenly there was time. Time to sit still, time to think, time to bake bread, apparently, time to reorganize closets like we were all starring in our own low-budget psychological thriller. Honestly, the pandemic was one giant collective Twilight Zone episode, and that is why Time Enough at Last hits differently now. Because Burgess Meredith's character finally gets the quiet he thought he wanted, and then discovers, too, much isolation changes people psychologically. Human beings are not built for endless emotional isolation. We need reflection, yes, but we also need connection. Many of us learned that during the pandemic. At first, the quiet felt peaceful. Then eventually, the quiet started feeling heavy. Days blurred together. Time became strange. People forgot what day it was. Some talked to their pets like roommates, and sometimes I believe that to be true. Some of us developed emotional relationships with grocery delivery drivers, and honestly, some people discovered they missed things they used to complain about constantly. To sit into traffic, their coworkers, restaurants, background noise, accidental conversations. Seeing strangers living ordinary lives. That irony is very Twilight Zone. The thing we thought would bring total relief ended up revealing something deeper about human nature. We do not just need quiet. We need meaning. We need rhythm. We need connection. We need imagination. And most of all, we need each other. That comparison sits in the body because we remember the feeling, the strange stillness, the distorted time, the silence, the uncertainty, the emotional suspension. Standing 6 feet apart from each other like we were all actors in a surreal social experiment. Talking through masks, waving through windows, missing funerals, missing graduations. I'm sure happy that everybody that gets to graduate this year gets to do it in person. Watching life continue and stop at the same time. There were moments during the pandemic when it genuinely felt like Rod Serling should appear in the corner of the room and narrate humanity. And that is part of why grief can feel so psychologically disorienting too. Grief isolates people emotionally in ways that are difficult to explain unless you have lived through it yourself. It creates a kind of internal quiet that can feel peaceful one moment and unbearable the next. One minute you want everyone to stop talking to you. The next minute you wish somebody understood exactly what you were feeling without you having to explain any of it. That contradiction is deeply human. And that is exactly the kind of psychological truth the Twilight Zone explored so brilliantly. The irony was never just for shock value. The irony exposed something true about human beings. In Time Enough at Last, the irony is that a man gets the quiet he wanted and loses the one thing that allowed him to enjoy it. In grief, the irony can be that you finally get space after a season of caretaking, crisis, or overwhelm, and then the space itself becomes painful. You waited for quiet, and then you got it. And the quiet was not simple. It was layered. It was heavy. It was not peace in a pretty package. It was a room full of questions. That is the bridge. The bridge is the place where grief asks the uncomfortable questions. Who am I now? What even matters now? How do I continue after life changes this dramatically? How do I hold memory without living only in the past? How do I stay connected to people when I feel emotionally displaced from ordinary life? How do I rebuild meaning? Those are not shallow questions. Those are human questions. And then there is the episode, The Obsolete Man, also with Burgess Meredith, where he plays a librarian declared obsolete by society. That word alone carries enormous psychological weight. Obsolete, unnecessary, irrelevant, disposable. Some grieving people may relate to that more than they want to admit, because grief can make you feel emotionally out of sync with a world obsessed with productivity and speed. The world says keep moving, keep producing, keep functioning. Meanwhile, your nervous system is over there trying to understand mortality itself. That episode argues something important. Humanity itself is never obsolete. Thoughtfulness is never obsolete. Emotion is not obsolete. Reflection is not obsolete. Curiosity is not obsolete. Imagination is not obsolete. Imagination. That word matters deeply to me, because imagination is not childish fantasy. Imagination is one of the deepest human survival tools we possess. It allows grieving people to envision that peace can exist again, that identity can evolve instead of disappear, that joy and grief may someday coexist in the same life. Without imagination, grief becomes emotional confinement. Imagination is what allows the lighthouse to exist. And the lighthouse matters because the bridge alone is not the full story. The bridge is emotional survival. The lighthouse is emotional reflection. The bridge is where everything feels surreal. The lighthouse is where understanding slowly begins. The bridge is raw sensation. The lighthouse is perspective. The bridge is where memories feel fragmented. The lighthouse is where stories slowly begin reconnecting again. Not perfectly, not instantly, but enough. Enough to breathe differently. Enough to laugh again without guilt. Enough to realize that humor does not betray grief. Sometimes humor is what keeps people alive inside grief. Because humans are strange and emotional and resilient all at once. We cry in parking lots and then immediately remember we still need paper towels. We have existential revelations while unloading groceries. We question the meaning of life, and then we forget why we walked into the kitchen. That is humanity too. I think that is why words like imagination, existential, and even syllogism make me happy. They point toward inquiry, toward depth, toward the ancient human desire to understand ourselves and each other. I have often said I admire Oprah because of her emotional intelligence and her ability to make people feel seen. But I also deeply admire Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle because they pursued understanding itself. They asked what it means to be human. They examined perception, identity, morality, thought, and meaning. And grief pushes people into those philosophical spaces, whether they plan to enter them or not. That is also why National Twilight Zone Day feels like the perfect doorway for this bonus episode. Because this is not only about nostalgia for a classic television show, it is about how that show gave us a language for psychological strangeness. For the surreal moments when life looks familiar, but no longer feels familiar. For the time when the world becomes emotionally altered and we have to ask, what is happening to me? What is real now? How do I find my way through this? The opening narration from the Twilight Zone talks about imagination as a dimension. I will not recite the whole thing here, but the idea matters. Imagination as a dimension. Imagination as a place where fear, knowledge, light, shadow, and mystery all meet. Grief can feel like that too. A dimension between who you were and who you are becoming. Between memory and meaning. Between emotional survival and emotional understanding. between the bridge and the lighthouse. On the bridge, it is all mystery. The bridge is emotional. The bridge holds suspense, unease, silence, and the strange feeling that something has changed, even if nobody else can see it. The void can feel like it stays in front of you like a shadow. Other people cannot always see it. They may be laughing, gathering, traveling, celebrating, making dinner plans, and living in the color of ordinary life. And you may be standing on the bridge, wondering how their world still works that way. The lighthouse is curiosity. The lighthouse is emotional reflection. The lighthouse is comfort because the stories slowly begin to make sense again. Not because the loss makes sense, not because everything is tied up neatly, but because your own experience begins to have language. Your own grief begins to have shape. Your own memory begins reconnecting to meaning. The lighthouse does not stop the wind. It helps you understand what the wind is doing. The wind may still be strong. It may still surprise you. It may still make noise in the dark. But sometimes the same wind that scared also touched your skin gently enough to calm you. Sometimes it feels like the presence of love. Sometimes it feels like memory. Sometimes it feels like your own body remembering how to keep going. Maybe that is where imagination comes back. Not imagination as escape, imagination as orientation. The ability to imagine that you are still here, that your life is still unfolding. That peace can return in moments. That humor can live beside sorrow. That quiet can become nourishing again instead of only lonely. That the bridge is not the end of the story. The lighthouse is not perfection. It is not certainty. It is not instant healing. What it is a small point of light that reminds you there is still meaning ahead even if you cannot fully see it yet. And maybe that is what both grief and the Twilight Zone have always been exploring all along. What does it mean to remain human when reality changes? What do we do when the world becomes emotionally unfamiliar? How do we keep our imagination alive when life takes a bizarre turn? How do we hold on to thoughtfulness, curiosity, reflection, and connection when everything feels strange? The answer is not always dramatic. Sometimes the answer is simply this: we keep walking. We let the wind scare us sometimes and calm us other times. We allow ourselves to laugh at the absurdity. We carry an extra pair of glasses if we know what is good for us, and we keep looking for the lighthouse. If this episode connected with you, I'd love for you to follow our podcast, leave a review, or share it with someone who may need it. Those small actions truly help new podcasts like Travel Through Grief grow and reach more people. And thank you to everyone who has already listened, rated, reviewed, and supported this journey. I appreciate you more than you know. Welcome to Travel Through Grief.